Members and guests, our keynote speaker today, Bill Oplinger, President and CEO from Alcoa Corporation, will have a conversation and a discussion today with Eric Johnston. Eric is a Collingwood supporter. Sorry, Eric, you told me that in confidence earlier. It's an important disclosure for this audience. But aside of that, he's an associate editor of The Australian, where he writes a daily business column. Many of you would have read much of his work. More than 25 years' experience as a finance journalist, including having been a former business editor of The Australian. He's been business editor of the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, and financial services editor with the Australian Financial Review. Covered the gamut of the Australian press. He's also had work appear in the Wall Street Journal. Please will you join me in welcoming Eric Johnston to the stage of the Melbourne Mining Club. I would also like to invite Sally Cox, Chair of the Melbourne Mining Club, to make the introduction of our guest speaker. Welcome, Sally.
Thanks, Hadley. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, today. So I'm really pleased today to introduce our guest speaker, Bill Oplinger, President and CEO of Alcoa Corporation, a global industry leader in bauxite, alumina, and aluminium production. Bill previously served as Executive Vice President and Chief Operations Officer of Alcoa, responsible for the daily operations of the company's global bauxite, alumina, and aluminium assets. From November 2016 to February 2023, Bill was Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of the company. Prior to joining Alcoa, Bill held engineering, marketing management, and business planning positions with Westinghouse and Emerson Electric. Bill earned a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering and operations research from Virginia Tech and a Master of Science with honours in industrial administration from Carnegie Mellon University, and is a fanatical ice hockey fan. Members and guests, please welcome Bill Oplinger to the Melbourne Mining Club.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Eric, thanks.
Good to see you again, Bill.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Take a seat. That's some introduction.
That was.
So
most of it was true.
Thank you for your time today, Bill. Look, Alcoa has a long association with Australia and Melbourne and Victoria in particular. Most people in this room would know it was a partner and operator of WMC's aluminium assets, including the Portland smelter that was commissioned in the late 80s out in the west of the state. So it was last year you pulled the trigger on the 3.4 billion Aussie buyout of alumina. That transaction only completed in August, which is not that long ago. So there's a few in this room again that would be well aware of the history. It was Hugh Morgan, who's actually sitting right in front of us, out the front here. He's a patron of the Melbourne Mining Club. He spun out WMC's aluminium holdings back in 2001. Now, at the time, he expected the partner, Alcoa, to turn up with a full takeover and a bag of cash. Instead, it was Xstrata and BHP that went after WMC's copper and other assets. So nothing eventuated for more than 2 decades, 20 years, and alumina endured. It was on the ASX. We had this, it was sort of the running commentary. It was a corporate post box, just taking the dividend checks and sending them out to shareholders. However, so 20 years, Bill, I have to ask you, why did it take you so long?
Let's start with the easy questions. So before I address that, I'm going to take 1 second to divert. And I just want to thank the Mining Club for having me. It is a true privilege to be here, and I'm looking around the room. But to see some of the legends of the industry and to actually sit down and have lunch with Hugh Morgan, who, for me, having joined the company 25 years, was just a legendary name. Lee Clifford, Andrew Mickle-Moore, and there's other folks in this room, but I am honored just to be present with so many legends. So We'll start there.
Okay.
It takes two to tango. So, this transaction has been attempted numerous times over the last 20 years. I can probably count 4 or 5 times where there's been various interactions between Alcoa and Alumina Limited over the last 20 years. And essentially what occurred in late 2023, the share prices had both moved in the same relation to each other. It became very clear and obvious, and if we just step back for a second, the structures that were set up the way they are today or then, as you said, Alumina Limited was a 40% owner in AWAC, non-operating. Alcoa Corp had been a part of the upstream business, and we were not spun off, we were separated out in 2016. So now you have this joint venture that used to be a fairly small part of a large company is now a big part of a fairly small company. So at the end of 2023, the shares traded down. There was really a window of opportunity to get the deal done. There's tremendous industrial logic for putting the two companies together. There's tax efficiencies, which we found in the process. There's debt, capital structure efficiencies. And so we were able to get the deal announced. And with any deal like this, there's plenty of drama, but there was plenty of drama in this one also. But we were able to get the deal announced toward the end of February. We closed on the deal August 1st. We paid off all their debt December 1st. The deal was accretive in the first 2 quarters. So I think it's turned out to be a fantastic deal. On top of that, it has allowed Alcoa Corp to do other transactions that would have been very difficult with the AWAC joint venture. So for instance, we've announced the swapping out of our joint venture in Australia. There had been very little value attributed to that joint venture. We're now going to get ownership in the parent company that equates to around $1.2 billion. That would have been difficult to do without having the joint venture rolled up. So overall, we're really pleased. And today, just to remind everyone, we probably have around a quarter of Alcoa Corp's ownership sitting in Australia. So we come to Australia a good deal to talk to our ownership, but also to see our assets.
So essentially it was a 20-year due diligence.
We knew the assets pretty well, let's put it that way.
I'm sure you did. Look, we've got a lot to get through today, and again, it's great to have an international name speaking to us here at the Melbourne Mining Club. So Bill, based in Pittsburgh, how's your past 100 days gone?
Just been hanging out. The last 100 days have been busy, have been very busy. You're alluding to some of the things that have been going on in Washington, and I'll jump right in on the tariffs, if you don't mind.
Let's go there.
It's going to be front and center on some of the questions anyways. President Trump has put in a series of tariffs. There's actually 3 tariff groupings. One is called the 232 tariff, which is on aluminum and steel. Second is called the IEEPA tariffs, which is for national emergencies. And the third is for reciprocal tariffs that were announced on Liberation Day. The effects on Alcoa are really on the first one, which is the 232 tariffs. And those are 25% tariffs on metal that comes from outside of the U.S. into the U.S. Now, just to keep in mind, the U.S. market is tremendously short aluminum. And for those of you who know the value chain of aluminum here, starts with bauxite, you refine it, and then you smelt it into aluminum. There's no more bauxite left, no more economic bauxite left in the United States. That was all mined out before World War II. There's only one small refinery left in the United States. Refining is not conducive, in the U.S. is not conducive for refining simply because you've got to bring the bauxite in from other parts of the world. There are only 4 smelters left in the U.S. And so the 232 tariffs are imposing 25% on metal that comes in. For Alcoa, the net effect, and I won't get into all the details, it's about $100 million negative on an annual basis. And the reason is we bring metal from Canada. We've got very competitive assets in Quebec, and we service that market in the U.S. Started to go down the path. The U.S. is very short aluminum. We're short 4.2 million metric tons a year of aluminum. We bring 2.9 million metric tons in from Canada. Every job in Canada in primary aluminum supports around 13 jobs in the U.S. in the downstream industries. So it's been a busy time. We've been advocating, both as Alcoa and as part of the U.S. Aluminum Association, to have an exemption on Canadian metal. So over the last 100 days, I've spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., more time than I think I've spent in my entire career.
Do you think the message is getting through? I mean, it's a pretty clear argument. There's no more bauxite in the country.
There's no more bauxite, there's no refining capacity, and we're short 4 million metric tons. I can tell you that we've sat down with folks in Congress, senators. I've spoken to 3 of the staff of President Trump, and they're listening, they hear. You know, last time in President Trump's administration, it took about 8 months before a Canadian exemption was granted. Now, I should back up just for a moment and make the point that we absolutely support having a competitive, strong manufacturing environment in the U.S. So we support what President Trump is attempting to do, and that is to create a strong manufacturing environment in the U.S. We're a U.S.-based company. We've been in business for 135 years. We're based in Pittsburgh. So we support that. We think the best way to do that is to make sure that metal comes from Canada into the U.S.
What's the real-world implication, though, of these tariffs? Are you seeing, obviously your end customers, are you seeing some impact on your end customers? Are things starting to change at the moment?
So in the first quarter, our downstream order books, and just to put it to put it in perspective for folks, we are very focused in the North American and the European markets. So we sell slab into packaging and automotive applications. We sell billet into building construction applications. And so we have a pretty good sense of what the markets look like for aluminum in Europe and North America. Our first quarter order book was strong. Our second quarter order book remains strong. So we have yet to see a fall off in orders associated with the tariffs. But I can tell you there's a lot of uncertainty, and when we're talking to our customers, they're uncertain about the future. So we just don't have good insight much past the first half. Now, where I thought you were going with that question, we're having to make real-time decisions on some of these tariff announcements. So for instance, back in March, I was in Messina and we were hosting some media from Fox Business. And there was a 25% tariff as of that morning, and the tariffs were going to go into effect that evening. I think it was March 12th. It was announced during the course of the day that those tariffs would be 50% tariffs. A 50% tariff drastically changes trade flows into the United States. And at that point, literally that day, if tariffs were going to go on that night, we were making decisions to stop shipping from Canada into the United States. And we were about an hour away to stop all rail cars from Canada into the United States. However, later in the day, at around 4 o'clock, it reverted back to a 25% tariff, which allowed us, even though that's not optimal, it allowed us to continue to ship into the U.S.
That is incredible. And this is just one company, yourself, quite a sizable company, but you think of this situation being replicated right across the S&P 500, hundreds of other companies also making real-time decisions. That's not how you plan a business environment. That's not good for a conducive for returns.
It's not conducive for returns. It's certainly challenging our agility. And you know, people talk about being agile. We've learned to be pretty agile pretty quickly. And as you can imagine, we have a team of folks, and we have a team of folks who are analyzing these tariffs all the time. We have a team of folks that are working on all the different trade flows. Where's the metal? Where does it make the most sense to sell the metal? And they're doing this instead of doing other things. And so, you know, a lot of time spent on it.
We sat down last November, and I'm not sure if the election had actually been held at that stage.
I think it had.
It had just come in.
I think it had. Yes, it had, because I was actually in Canberra the day that the election came out. Yes.
That's right. So,
boy, a lot of things changed.
So at that point, I think you were one of 2 US CEOs that actually spoken out diplomatically about the prospect of tariffs. You're a global company. A lot of CEOs ran for cover. Just last week, there was a gentleman, you may have heard of him, Elon Musk. He was doing a briefing for his little car company that he operates. That was, within that, he spoke quite openly about the need for lower trade barriers and the impact of tariffs on his business. Now, given Musk's proximity to the United States president, that must, at least as a corporate leader, at least give you cover to be able to speak about it a bit more freely. Is that right?
We were pretty early on vocal around what we saw as potentially the impacts of tariffs. Specifically, there's an independent research report that said if there was a 25% tariff on Canadian metal, it would have a negative impact of around 100,000 jobs in the U.S. So subsequent to that, we've been advocating with the government to try to ensure they understand all the dynamics. I believe in the U.S. there are now more CEOs, including Mr. Musk, who are advocating for free and fair trade. We start with the basis that we agree with what the president is trying to accomplish. We all want a strong American economy. We all want a strong manufacturing base in the U.S. We just think the best way to do that is to have metal coming in from Canada specifically. So,
and just so we've got you on the record, your views on trade, free trade?
Free and fair trade, and we understand completely if certain governments, for strategic reasons, feel that they have to put tariffs in place. We understand that. We've worked with administrations over 135 years. We'll work with them again, but we clearly prefer free and fair trade.
Okay. We'll move on to another topic. Just finally, to close that out, though, impact on pricing. Have you seen any? Obviously, you said demand hadn't seen much change, but what about pricing on markets?
It's important to understand how metal is priced. So there are 3 or 4 different components of metal. So if you're an extruder in the middle part of America and you want to buy metal from Alcoa, you're going to buy it based on the London Metal Exchange. On top of that, you will have a Midwest premium. On top of that, you'll have a value or alloy premium, a shape premium or an alloy premium. And then maybe even on top of that, you'll have a green premium if you're looking to buy certified low carbon metal. In relation to the tariffs, we have seen the Midwest spot premium react accordingly to having to include those 25% tariffs. Subsequent to that, the London Metal Exchange prices have actually come down a little bit, but I think that's due to the uncertainty around global growth in the world. After Liberation Day, the following 5 trading days, aluminum prices fell something like 15%, as did a number of other asset values, and that was, in our view, due to the sentiment around slowing global growth.
Just this week, we saw a power outage over in Spain. Now, Alcoa, as it happens, has a smelter in San Ciprian in the north of the country. The complex was impacted, and again, when most people here knows when a smelter stops working, when it's not meant to, unplanned interruptions, that's very bad, very, very bad. You put out a statement as a result of the outage confirming the impact. The company is conducting a thorough assessment of the facility to determine the full extent of the operational financial impact. That doesn't sound good.
Well, let's just, we have both a smelter and a refinery in San Ciprián, so it's a co-located facility. The refinery makes around 2,200 tons per day of a combination of smelter-grade alumina and non-metallurgical grade alumina. The refinery, for any of you who know refineries, they're fairly easy to bring back online. And so while it was down for 9 hours, we were able to agitate the precipitators and get it back online fairly quickly. So not a major impact there. We were in the process of restarting the smelter. And so we have a commitment to restart that smelter that was made with the employees that says we will target having the smelter fully restarted by October 1st of this year. Luckily, we only were about 10%, 8% into that restart. So out of 500 pots in the smelter, we have 40 that were in the process of being restarted. As you said, a 9-hour outage for an aluminum plant is very difficult to manage. We actually were able to keep some of those pots online and keep them warm. But it really, and at this point, we don't yet have an answer to what happened to the energy in Spain. And in my view, we will take some days to evaluate the risk associated with further losses of power. If the grid doesn't understand what happened, it is very difficult to have an electro-intensive business in a place that can't guarantee that the electricity will stay on.
This is a broader question, but are we looking at the point of peak renewables and the impact of renewables on your business?
We, within the smelting business, about 87% of our electricity used is sustainable, renewable energy. That's largely hydro in Quebec, in Iceland, in Brazil. There's some wind, right? So we actually have a smelter in the northern part of Norway that is wind-powered and hydro-firmed.
Right.
So for Alcoa, the only remaining non-green, non-sustainable energy sources are really in 3 places. One is in Evansville, Indiana. We own a coal plant there. We own the coal mine. We own the coal plant. So that is not green energy. The second is the grid in Spain. So we're buying off the grid. A part of that grid is still not sustainable. And the third is here in Melbourne. Not in Melbourne, sorry, here in Victoria. And it's down at Portland. We're buying off the grid there, and the grid is not completely renewable at this point.
There's a rival of yours, Rio Tinto, and they're looking to be in Australia, the front edge of renewables in terms of smelting. So up in Gladstone, they're looking at full intermittent energy, a combination of wind, solar, and batteries. For your mind, is it technically possible to do a combination? These are the ingredients we have here in Australia, wind, solar, and batteries to run a smelter?
That's a really difficult question. I think the wind and the solar work. I've not seen yet a battery application that's going to be cost effective enough to power a smelter. I think wind and solar firmed with other energy sources is the way to go for many countries, but specifically Australia. You've got ample solar, you've got ample wind resources. It's going to be firming it with something. When I say firming it, the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. What is that backup source? And so one of the things that Australia needs to figure out is what is that backup source. And I'm not convinced it's battery yet. And just to answer your question very specifically, I've not seen an economic business case that says batteries can be built big enough to back up a smelter.
Does nuclear make sense?
I think nuclear in the mix of energy sources makes a lot of sense. I think that it will take time to build out. Sometimes, depending on the regulatory situation, it can be expensive. But I do think as a firming source, nuclear can make sense.
One more I'll throw at you. What about green hydrogen?
Not focused on it. Don't even have a good answer for you. Haven't found that hydrogen is anywhere close to being economic enough to do anything with. So we are heavy natural gas users in Western Australia. We're looking at other sustainable sources of energy, but hydrogen for us is not in the cards at this point.
While we're here in Melbourne, speaking of this beautiful town hall, every 5 or 6 years or so, the discussion around Portland comes up. What's Portland mean for your portfolio at the moment? How's the outlook there?
So Portland is a good technology. It has a great workforce. Unfortunately, it's far away from the two major end markets, which are the U.S. and Europe, or North America and Europe. And Portland, along with every smelter, comes down to energy sources. And so at this point, as I mentioned, it's one of the 3 places that still does not have completely sustainable energy. That is not the major factor for us. It's around cost. And so we have repowered Portland through 2035. So we've got power contracts that run through 2035. As we approach 2035, we'll have to work through whether we can get sustainable low-cost energy again at that point.
You're hopeful? You're optimistic?
I'm always hopeful. I always want to keep our plants operating. There's a lot of time for things to change, and so we were just recently able to repower it well enough to keep it running. So yeah, I'm absolutely hopeful that we'll be able to find a solution.
So in terms of, you're a global company, you have operations, Canada, as you've mentioned, Europe, we've spoken about Spain, Latin America, Brazil. You generate around $12 billion in sales, US dollars, 300 million earnings last year. We hear a lot of discussion. What's your positioning about investing in Australia? Is Australia an investable proposition for you?
So the short answer is yes, Australia is an investable country for us. But if I step back and give you the background, we have mines in Australia, Guinea, and Brazil. We have refineries in Australia, Spain, and Brazil. We have 2 of the lowest cost refineries in the world here in Western Australia. Once those get back to better bauxite quality, which will happen over the next couple of years, they will be in the lowest 10% of the cost curve in the world. And then we've got 11 smelters around the world, one of which is here in Australia. As I look at Australia, you have an endowment of minerals, specifically for us, bauxite. It's where the bauxite is, and that's Australia. Secondly, a fantastic workforce. Not inexpensive by any stretch, but a fantastic workforce, both for us in Portland and in WA. The piece, and you hear me say energy, 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 the piece that you have to get right is this balance of energy. And for us, that means a domestic gas policy. We're big users of gas. We will be big users of gas for a long time into the future. And an energy policy on the East Coast that allows us to be competitive globally in Portland. So when I look at investing around the world, Australia is a place that we will invest in the future.
Given the global, your discussions and looking at global markets, where does Australia sit within its energy confusion? Is it right in the middle of the cohort, or is it way behind, or are we? This is going on around the world, but where does Australia sit in this spectrum?
There are places around the world which are completely committed to their aluminum industry. And they're committed to their aluminum industry by ensuring that inexpensive green energy, or I should say competitive green energy, is available. Those places are like Quebec, Norway. So I would say, I would put them to the very far edge that says, for an aluminum industry, for an aluminum company, they are committed to having a successful industry. I would put Australia somewhere in the middle. You've got a gas allocation policy, so you're committed to make sure that the refineries stay competitive. But along with every country, you still have to think through the policy.
Last year, you closed the Kwinana refinery in Western Australia. Why? Was that becoming too tough, too difficult?
No. Kwinana, and we didn't officially close it, we curtailed it, and at this point, it sits in a state that's ready to be restarted. There are no indications that it would be restarted anytime soon. The reason why we curtailed it at the time is it's high cost, it's complex, it has proximity to Perth, it's landlocked, so for all the, and it's old technology. For all those reasons, we decided to curtail it at that point, and we hold it in a state that if we choose, it can be restarted. However, with that said, the majority of the workforce has left, has gone on to do better jobs. One of the things that we have found that when we restart facilities, we tend to underestimate how important the knowledge of that workforce is. And bringing back a workforce into Kwinana to restart that, I think, would be a big challenge.
If we're talking about investing, there's a steel mill in Whyalla that's up for sale. You not interested in?
I'm sorry, there's what?
A steel mill in Whyalla that's up for sale.
No steel. No steel. Steel's a dirty word in the Oplinger household. You know, and I think you're alluding to maybe a broader question, and I'll answer the broader question. We're a vertically integrated aluminum company. We mine, we refine, we smelt. We're focused on being successful at a vertically integrated aluminum. We're not lithium, we're not copper, we don't bring anything to steel, and we're focused on being the world's best upstream aluminum company, and we'll let others do those other materials.
So there's a lot of money in this room, a lot of dry powder, so to speak, a lot of funds. Is that why you would say Alcoa is a good investment?
So I would tell you Alcoa is a good investment for a number of reasons. If you want to invest in the primary aluminum industry, I think you have only one choice, right? You've got Alcoa. Why do I say that? We're long bauxite, we're long alumina, and we're long aluminum. You combine that with Western world governance, you look at where all the other competitors are, you can't get a pure play aluminum company with Western world governance unless you buy Alcoa. Now, that's a good reason to look at Alcoa. The reason why you buy Alcoa is you want exposure to the aluminum industry, but you want a really, really well-run company. And we've made a series of steps over the last 8 years to significantly reposition the company. We've fixed our pension problem. For many of you who have followed us, when we originated, we had a large underfunded pension, U.S. pension. That's gone. Our U.S. pensions are now 100% funded. We had a stretched balance sheet. We now have a target of $1 to $1.5 billion of net debt. We're sitting at about $2 billion, so we're about $500 million away from our target on our balance sheet. So we're in a much better situation there. We've pruned the portfolio, and we've now simplified the portfolio by bringing in Alumina Limited, which gives us a lot of flexibility on the capital structure. So it's a management team that's dedicated to creating shareholder value. If you're interested in the aluminum industry, I think there's one choice.
Remember, these are Aussie investors, so you forgot the D word, dividends.
Yes, they're Aussie investors, and it's important to remember that around a quarter of our ownership globally sits here in Australia. When we did the Alumina Limited transaction, we picked up a lot of Aussie investors. We are committed to the CDIs. You will see and hear me in Australia a couple of times a year. I've got my CFO with me, Molly Bierman. We are committed to supporting the CDIs, and so we'll be here.
And where are you off to next, Bill? You never seem to be in one place for very long, so where to next?
And just to give you a sense, I started this week in Perth. We did a great tour of our mining and refining locations for some analysts. Was then over in Sydney seeing many investors. Melbourne now. I'm going to be back in Pittsburgh for a week. After about 5 days, my wife is pretty sick of me, and so then I move on to somewhere else. We'll be in Europe to see investors, and then I'm going to actually meet some customers. And a big part of my job is making sure that our customers are happy. So I'll be in Europe with customers. So that's where I'm off to next.
All right, thank you, Hadley.
A marvellous discussion over lunch and very well executed, Eric. Thanks very much. Folks, perhaps we could just thank our speakers briefly before we go to questions from the floor. With a pitch like that, I'm sure there's a few people on their phones buying some Alcoas, but if you've got a question, please raise your hand, wait for the microphone to come to you, stand so we can see you, and state your name and affiliation. First one from right up the back. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you for coming to Australia. It's good to see you. My name's Rick Holmes. I'm a former employee of Alcoa, and it was a good company to work for. A question that I suppose it's probably on the back burner, but given that we have a positive trade flow with the United States, would it be possible to do a deal with the big deal maker about us exporting refined alumina to the US and then you go and build a new smelter over there? Any chance of a new smelter in the USA?
So thanks for the question. The opportunity to build a new smelter in the United States is just like building a new smelter anywhere else in the world. We need low-cost, preferably sustainable, renewable energy. And so I believe with this administration, we will have an energy policy in the United States that will give the U.S. very competitive energy for the next, foreseeable future. So when we look at brownfields and greenfields, I would say that the United States is back on the radar to actually look at an opportunity to build a smelter. And that's because we think we can get competitive energy in the U.S. We would not be building that smelter based on tariffs. Tariffs can come and go. What we would be building that smelter, and I don't have any plans right now, so don't run out thinking that we're building a smelter. But if there was an opportunity for low-cost energy, we would look at a smelter in the U.S.
I think the second question is right in the middle of the floor from one of the students.
And the alumina would come from Brazil, so don't get too excited about the. It's too far. We'll find a place to put that Aussie alumina. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Andrea. Thank you for speaking to us today. I'm a student at Monash University. You spoke extensively about importing Canadian metals to refineries in America, but you also highlighted a 25% Australian ownership rate. How do your lobbies for the Canadian exemptions impact your presence in Australian business?
Cash is fungible, right? And so when we have to pay a $400 million tariff to bring in metal from Canada into the U.S., that is $400 million that we can't use for other things. We can't use that for delevering. We can't use it for paying dividends to shareholders. We can't use it for reinvesting in places like Quebec, Norway, and Australia. So when we're lobbying for or advocating for a Canadian exemption, it gives us the cash and flexibility to do all those other fun things, like, and you, as a student, you might not think these are fun, but like delevering, like paying returns to shareholders, like reinvesting in the business. So that's how the two are interrelated. Great question.
Good question.
Got another one up the back. And Rowan, when you're done, there's another one up the front as well, mate.
Hi, Nina Thomas from Harmonic Advisory. Just keen to hear your thoughts on innovation and what's coming, future trends, like what's exciting in the business, go to the moon, that sort of stuff. So can you share a bit of insight into that, please?
Yes, we have, within Alcoa, we have two types of innovation. I would say the first type is focused on process improvement. That is largely led by our organization in Western Australia. And that is what has allowed us to incrementally increase the production at our refineries around the world by 1% to 2%. These are small innovations around process improvements, and that's led by a team in Western Australia. The big breakthrough technologies, there are 3 sets of breakthrough technologies that Alcoa is working on, one of which we're working on with a partner. The first is what's called ELYSIS, which is zero carbon producing smelting process. Smelting has been done the same way for 135 years. Now the process is improved, the pots are bigger, the amps are larger, the energy consumption's better. However, the process itself has not changed. ELYSIS changes that process to provide for a inert anode, an anode that doesn't get consumed in the process, and it would create essentially zero carbon aluminum from the smelting process. The other breakthrough technology that we're working on is something called Estrella. Estrella takes scrap essentially out of the scrap yard, Zorba and Twitch, and creates high purity aluminum. So you put in Zorba and Twitch on the one end, which is automotive scrap. On the other end, you get high purity aluminum out, ultra high purity aluminum. That is a huge breakthrough, and it may allow Alcoa to enter the scrap, the secondary business, which we're not a big player in today. And then the third is really looking at step changes in refining. So can we eliminate gas-fired calcination? Can we use electricity for calcination? What that does is it allows us to use green energy that's probably lower cost and recapture the water molecule. Right now, the water molecule goes up into the atmosphere, right? Within water-intensive places like Western Australia, it would be great to be able to recapture the water model. Those are the 3 breakthrough technologies that I'm excited about. What I would tell you, that first set, the process technologies, they deliver day in and day out. It's those breakthroughs that they're out on the horizon.
I'm pretty sure you said the high tech that makes high purity alumina is called Australia.
What's that?
Play on words, sorry, Bill. Another question from the student table right there in the middle.
Oh, look out.
Hey, Bill, thank you so much for that. My name's Abhay, and I'm from Monash University. So, a short view back to the past. It's been over a decade since Alcoa closed down its aluminum smelter down at Geelong. Can you please tell us exactly how the company managed to manage the impact of this closure on the workers and the local community? And I have another question on building on top of that. The overall production at Portland has also been reduced due to the operational instability. This was back in 2023. What are some learnings that for a probable closure down at Portland that you can learn from Geelong?
I have no desire to close Portland, so I'm not going to even address that one. I don't, you know, we learn every time we close a site. I'm sick of closing sites, but so I'm much more focused on the Portland side of trying to make sure that we can get it repowered, because I think Portland's a great plant with a great workforce and a good technology, so we're focused there. Let me go back and address your Point Henry question. It has been about a decade since we permanently closed Point Henry. Whenever we close a facility, we try, and you can see this, probably best example is in Kwinana, we try to make sure that the workforce is treated fairly, whether that means redundancy packages or helping them get jobs in different parts of, in different industries around the area. So that's what we did at Point Henry. We offered some really good redundancy packages. We then dismantle the site and remediate the site back to a really, really strong standard. And in the case of Point Henry, and maybe I'm saying something out of school, but Point Henry is being marketed today for sale to be completely redeveloped. Point Henry is a fantastic site. It's got 270-degree views into the bay, so it will be redeveloped into something. We're in the process of marketing to sell it to someone to redevelop it. We're not in the job of redeveloping sites once we've remediated them to the appropriate standard. But great set of questions. Thanks.
Last question right here in front, and it will have a question mark on the end, won't it, Mitch?
Thanks, Hadley. That was cheap. Very much enjoyed your presentation, Mitch Hook, Partners in Performance. So tariffs have essentially three fundamental objectives. One is to protect domestic manufacturing, as you say. Secondly, they can be for raising taxes. And thirdly, they can be in the form of anti-dumping or countervailing duties. Anti-dumping being the commercial and countervailing being to counter government subsidies. Now, of course, China has made an art form out of predatory dumping, where I think there are 6 or 7 dumping complaints in the WTO right now. They've built over capacity and are flooding markets. So when you look at what you said about fair and free trade, the fair trade is the anti-dumping stuff. The aspect of protecting a market in America, well, for the pre-derivative products and the mid-tiers, you don't have an industry in that space to protect, as you said. So the manufacturing has to be in the end products. That's the area where China is dumping and predatory dumping, and taxes have been a driver for revenue to basically offset their debt. So of all of those three areas, which do you think President Trump's tariffs are actually designed to achieve an outcome? Taxes, protecting domestic manufacturing, or actually going into the fair trade of countering China's, in particular, dumping, but others as well?
All three of those reasons have been given to me in discussions with various administration folks. There are other reasons that have been given to me on top of that. So there's 1 or 2 more, and maybe they fall into some of your broader categories. Number 1 is fentanyl and trying to fix the border. I don't think that has a big impact on Canada, but that's not really for me to say. That's for the administration to say. Out of all of those reasons, there are, I would think the administration would tell you that they're trying to address some of the imbalances in trade globally. The one that we can address is creating manufacturing in the United States. And the one that I get talked to the most about is, why don't you bring smelting to the United States? I don't want to say back to the United States, because I'm not going to take it out of a place and bring it somewhere. So why don't you invest in smelting? And our answer is similar to the answer that I gave earlier. A smelter in the US, if we start it today, will take 5 to 7 years. It'll cost $5 billion. It's going to require anywhere between 500 megawatts and 1,000 megawatts. All that needs to happen. That's not going to happen overnight. That may get up and running 5 to 7 years from now. So this concept of creating manufacturing in the near term is simply not going to happen in primary aluminum. To put it in perspective, when we talk about being 4 million metric tons short, that's 7 state-of-the-art smelters that need to be built in the United States. There's not been a smelter built in the United States in 40 years. 7 state-of-the-art smelters. You would need 6 to 7 gigawatts of energy. That's not gigawatt hours, that's gigawatts of energy. On top of that, it's going to cost $35 billion. We're a $6.5 billion market cap. When you all run out and buy shares, maybe we'll be higher than that. But we're a $6.5 billion market cap. We're not going to be the ones that put $35 billion into the ground into the United States. So I think that the administration is looking to affect all three of those. The one that we can have the biggest impact on will take time.
Bill, I think you've electrified the audience, no pun intended. I can still see hands, but we're out of time for questions, I'm afraid. So, folks, just a round of applause for taking all those ones on the chin.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks very much.
And I'd now like to ask John Tivy, partner White & Case, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Members and guests, it's my great pleasure to do the vote of thanks today. First of all, Eric, I know you just did this off the cuff without any preparation, kind of an easy day for you, but seriously, we had to give Hadley the Master of Ceremonies role so that you could fill that seat because, you know, he has wanted to stay in the interview role. But fabulous job.
Thank you.
And it was a really enlightening session. Bill, your interview today offered us a really insightful window into the current landscape and strategic thinking at Alcoa. On the last 100 days of politics in the US, and in particular tariffs, I think the message was clear that Alcoa supports a strong US manufacturing sector, but building and restarting domestic smelters can't be justified on the basis of tariff policies. And more importantly, given the volumes and your supply chain, access to Canadian aluminium is essential to downstream industries in the US. On energy security, we heard your need for proactive planning to deliver long-term competitive energy at the Portland facility and for a stable and forward-looking energy policy that balances renewables and reliable baseload power. On aluminium, your take on the global aluminium outlook was optimistic. And finally, on competitive advantages, you highlighted to us Alcoa's competitive edge through vertical integration, long-term customer relationships, all clearly position you very well in a complex and rapidly evolving global landscape. Members and guests, please join me in thanking Bill for his time and engagement with us today. Thanks, Bill.
Here we go.
Thanks very much, Bill. Good on you, mate.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Oh, what is this?
We're not sure. You'll have to tell us.
I'm going to have to open it up, and I don't know how I'm going to get this home either. I love that. That's cool. Thank you. Thank you, Hadley.